Hello, my students. Miss Heidi has been sick, so I wasn't able to read the book and make the videos this weekend, but I'm starting to feel a little better, so I'm going to read a few of them and make these videos. And in these videos, what I really want you guys to learn to read the way that I am reading, okay? I don't want you to just keep reading. I want you to pause for a moment. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. Where the red fern grows. Okay. Here's an introduction. We're going to skip that. And we're going to start on chapter 1. Okay, so this is how I want you guys to read. When I left my office that beautiful spring day, I had no idea what was in store for me. To begin with, everything was too perfect for anything unusual to happen. It was one of these days when a man feels good, feels like speaking to his neighbor, is glad to live in a country like ours, and proud of his government. You know what I mean, one of those rare days when everything is right and nothing is wrong. Okay, so that is the first paragraph that we just read. So after each paragraph, I want you guys to go back and kind of see if you understood what you just read. Okay, we just understood that he left his office, and this seems like, you know, if he's leaving his office, the main character, who is Billy, then, you know, kids usually don't leave the office because they don't work in an office. And in the front of the cover, we see that Billy is a child. So, and it says it's about a boy and his dogs. So, who is this person that's talking? It might be Billy as an adult, right? So let's see. We know that this is an adult, okay? So he's feeling good today. He's having a great day. He feels really good. And he just felt that everything was way too perfect. That day was just a really good day. Okay, let's keep reading. I was walking along whistling when I heard the dog fight. Oh man, this is where it's going to get crazy. At first, I paid no attention to it. After all, it wasn't anything to get excited about, just another dog fight in a residential section. Okay, so I thought it was going to be something that was a big deal. But he's saying dog fights are pretty common, okay? You always hear them, so nothing to get excited about here. As the sound of the fight grew nearer, I could tell there were quite a few dogs mixed up in it. They boiled out of an alley, turned, and headed straight toward me. Not wanting to get bitten or run over, I moved over to the edge of the sidewalk. So there was a lot of dogs in this dog fight, and they almost crashed into him, and he didn't want to get bitten or run over by all of these dogs, so he moved to the edge of the sidewalk. See, so every time you do a paragraph, review what you read and see if you understood it, okay? Don't just keep reading, because then you're not going to remember. Review each paragraph. I could see that all the dogs were fighting one. Okay, so there were a bunch of dogs and they were fighting one dog. About 25 feet from me, they caught him and down he went. I felt sorry for the unfortunate one. I knew if something wasn't done quickly, the sanitation department would have to pick up a dead dog. So he knew that if he didn't help the dog, these dogs were going to kill him. So he needed to help this poor dog. I was trying to make up my mind to help when I got a surprise. Up out of that snarling, growling, slashing mass reared an old red-bone hound. For a second I saw him. I caught my breath. I couldn't believe what I'd seen. Okay, so he was thinking about, should I help this dog? Should I not help? There's a lot of dogs, they might bite me. What do I do? But then he saw that it was an old red-bone hound. Okay? Twisting and slashing, he fought his way through the pack and backed up under the low branches of a hedge. Growling and snarling, they formed a half-moon circle around him. Okay, so what's a half moon circle? It's like, here's the dog right here, my finger is the dog, and then there's a half moon circle like this. They're all surrounding him, okay? So the dog is fighting them, and but they're all surrounding him. A big bird dog, bolder than the others, darted in. The head shook as he tangled with the hound. Okay, so there's this big bird dog, and he is just fighting him. He went and fought the red-bone hound. He came out so fast he fell over backwards. I saw that his right ear was split wide open. It was too much for him, and he took off down the street, squalling like a scalded cat. Okay, so the red-bone hound was able to fight off this dog. Okay, now another one comes. Let's see. A big, ugly cur tried his luck. He didn't get off so easy. He came out with his left shoulder laid open to the bone. He sat down on his rear and let the whole world know that he had been hurt. Okay, so then another dog came and tried to fight the hound, but he ended up getting, I guess he bit him on the shoulder, and you could see his bone. That's how bad the bite was. By this time, my fighting blood was boiling. It's hard for a man to stand and watch an old hound fight against such odds, especially if that man has memories in his heart, like I had in mine. I had seen the time when an old hound like that had given his life so that I might live. So he was getting really upset. Okay, so this man was getting very upset because he was looking at the hound and he was fighting all of these dogs, just him by himself. It wasn't a fair fight. And he had really good memories in his heart about the time where he had an old hound, and his own old hound would have given up his life just so that he could be alive, because the dog loved him so much. Taking off my coat, I waded in. My yelling and scolding didn't have much effect, but the swinging coat did. The dog scattered and left. So he went after the dogs, started yelling at them, and they just stayed there. That didn't scare them. But then when he grabbed his coat and started swinging at them, then the dogs got really afraid, and then they finally left and left the hound alone. Okay. Down on my knees, I peered back under the hedge. The hound was still mad. He growled at me and showed his teeth. I knew it wasn't his nature to fight a man. So the hound is growling at him and showing his teeth. It's not because he wants to fight a human. It's because he's still shaken up over the fight, and he's just been defending himself. So he's not sure if this man is going to be a friend or if he's going to be someone else that he needs to fight. In a soft voice, I started talking to him. "Come on, boy," I said. "It's all right. I'm your friend. Come on now." The fighting fire slowly left his eyes. He bowed his head, and his long red tail started thumping the ground. Okay, so he started talking to him softly, telling him to come over. And little by little, the dog started to realize, oh, okay, this is a nice person. I don't have to fight him. I'm starting to calm down. I kept coaxing. On his stomach, an inch at a time, he came to me and laid his head in my hands. So he kept going until finally he got the dog to come to him. I almost cried at what I saw. His coat was dirty and mud-caked. His skin was stretched, drummed tight over his bony frame. The knotty joints of his hips and shoulders stood out a good 3 inches from his body. I could tell he was starved. So he was very bony, very dirty, and he felt so sad for the poor dog. I couldn't figure it out. He didn't belong in town. He was far out of place with the boxers, poodles, bird dogs, and other breeds of town dogs. He belonged in the country. He was a hunting hound. I raised one of his paws. There I read the story. The pads were worn down slick as the rind on an apple. So first, with this paragraph, he said that he knew that the dog didn't belong there because he was a hunting hound. And then he looked at one of his paws, and he said there in his paws he could tell what had happened to this dog. So the pads were worn down slick. That means he'd been walking a lot, so they were not nice and fluffy. They were very worn out, his poor little paws. I knew he had come a long way, and no doubt had a long way to go. Around his neck was a crude collar. On closer inspection, I saw it had been made from a piece of check-lined leather. 2 holes had been punched in each end, and the ends were laced together with baling wire. Okay, so he saw his collar. As I turned the collar with my finger, I saw something else. There, scratched deep in the tough leather, was the name, Buddy. I guessed that the crude, scribbly letters had probably been written by a little boy. So he saw the little scratched in letters that said Buddy, and it looked like a little boy's handwriting, like a child's handwriting. And he just guessed it was a boy. It's strange indeed how memories can lie dormant in a man's mind for so many years. Yet those memories can be awakened and brought forth fresh and new just by something you've seen or something you've heard or the sight of an old familiar face. Okay, so he's saying he had all of these memories in his mind that he hadn't even thought about, but then something about this dog just brought back so many memories to this man. What I saw in the warm gray eyes of the friendly old hound brought back wonderful memories. To show my gratitude, I took hold of his collar and said, "Come on, boy, let's go home and get something to eat." He seemed to understand that he had found a friend. He came willingly. I gave him a bath and rubbed all the soreness from his muscles. He drank quarts of warm milk and ate all the meat I had in the house. Okay, so I've read a lot. I'm going to stop and go back. So he said that he wanted to show gratitude to the dog for bringing back wonderful memories of his own, I guess, childhood or when he had a dog. So he took the dog home and he gave him food to eat. The dog felt that he had found a friend in him because he was being so kind to the dog. So the dog went with him and he gave him a bath. He rubbed him so that he wouldn't be sore, all his muscles could relax. And then he drank warm milk and ate all of the meat that the man had in the house. So he's really hungry. I hurried down to the store and bought more. So he bought even more meat. He ate until he was satisfied, so the dog kept eating until he was completely full. He slept all that night and most of the next day. Late in the afternoon, he grew restless. I told him I understood, and as soon as it was dark, he could be on his way. I figured he had a much better chance if he left town at night. Okay, so the dog started to grow restless because he wanted to leave, probably to go back to his owner. And the man told him he understood, and he let the dog go at night so that those other dogs that were bullying him wouldn't come and get him, because at night they would be asleep. That evening, a little after sundown, I opened the back gate. He walked out, stopped, turned around, and looked at me. He thanked me by wagging his tail. So the sun went down, and he let the dog go so he can go back to his owner. And he wagged his tail. With tears in my eyes, I said, "You're more than welcome, old fellow. In fact, you could have stayed here as long as you wanted to." He whined and licked my hand. I was wondering which way he would go. With one final whimper, he turned and headed east. I couldn't help smiling as I watched him trot down the alley. I knew the way his hindquarters shifted over to the right, never in line with the front, yet always in perfect rhythm. Okay. His long ears flopped up and down, keeping time with the jogging motion of his body. Yes, they were all there, the unmistakable marks of a hunting hound. So he was saying that because of how the dog was walking, and how his body was moving, he could tell just by those things that he was a hunting hound. So obviously this man knows a lot about hunting hounds, because I would never, would you ever see a dog walking different and say, oh, that has to be a hunting dog? I wouldn't know that. But this man seems like he knows what he's talking about. So he must have experience with hunting hounds, maybe. Where the alley emptied into the street, he stopped and looked back. I waved my hand. As I watched him disappear into the twilight shadows, I whispered these words, "Goodbye, old fella. Good luck and good hunting." I didn't have to let him go. I could have kept him in my backyard, but to pen up a dog like that is a sin. It would have broken his heart. The will to live would have slowly left his body. So hunting dogs, they like to go out and they like to be free in the wilderness hunting. So that's why he's saying there's no way he could have kept that dog in the backyard, in a in a dog house or anything like that, because the dog would have really got really upset and sad, because he would have wanted to go back to hunting. I had no idea where he had come from or where he was going. Perhaps it wasn't too far, or maybe it was a long, long way. I tried to make myself believe that his home was in the Ozark Mountains, somewhere in Missouri or Oklahoma. It wasn't impossible, even though it was a long way from the Snake River Valley in Idaho. So this is just him daydreaming, the man daydreaming about where the dog might have come from, where he lived. I figured something drastic must have happened in his life, as it is very unusual for a hound to be traveling all alone. Perhaps he had been stolen, or maybe he had been sold for some much needed money. Whatever it was that had interrupted his life, he was trying to straighten it out. He was going home to the master he loved, and with the help of God, he would make it. So here he was saying he wondered what happened to this hound. Did he get lost? Did his owners sell him because they needed money? But whatever had happened to him, he was hoping that he made it home with the help of God to his master. To him, it made no difference how long the road or how rough or rocky. His old feet would keep jogging along, on and on, mile after mile. There would be no crying or giving up. When his feet grew tired and weary, he would curl up in the weeds and rest. Water from a rain puddle or a mountain stream would quench his thirst and cool his hot, dry throat. Food found along the highway or the offerings from a friendly hand would ease the pangs of hunger. Through the rains, the snows, or the desert heat, he would jog along, never looking back. So he was talking about the hound, and he was saying that no matter how tired he was, no matter if he didn't have food, he would find food somewhere on the way to go home. If he was thirsty, he would find water somewhere. He would not give up until he made it to his owner. Some morning he would be found curled up on the front porch. The long journey would be over. He would be home. There would be a lot of tail wagging and a few whimpering cries. His warm, moist tongue would caress the hand of his master. All would be forgiven. Once again, the lights would shine in his dog's world. His heart would be happy. So he's just saying once he got home to his owner, he would be really happy, and he would once again be just be a really happy dog because he went back home to his owner. After my friend had disappeared in the darkness, I stood and stared at the empty alley. A strange feeling came over me. At first I thought I was lonely or sad, but I realized that wasn't it at all. The feeling was a wonderful one. Although the old hound had no way of knowing it, he had stirred up memories, and what priceless treasures they were. Memories of my boyhood days, an old Casey baking powder can, and 2 little red hounds. Memories of a wonderful love, unselfish devotion, and death in its saddest form. Okay, so he said that this dog, just meeting this dog, had stirred up all of these memories about him being a young boy, and having 2 little red hounds, some baking powder can, and love, devotion. Devotion means when you are just kind of just, that's a hard one to actually but yeah, devotion just means like you are going to be there for someone no matter what. Okay, you are devoted to them. You are there in the good and the bad. You're always going to be there no matter what. And death in its saddest form. Oh man, so he probably, I'm thinking maybe he lost his puppies because he's still here. And he said 2 little red hounds. As I turned to enter my yard, I started to lock the gate, and then I thought, no, I'll leave it open. He might come back. I was halfway to the house when a cool breeze drifted down from the rugged Tetons. It had a bite in it, and goose pimples jumped out of my skin. So he was going to close the gate, and he was about to get to his house halfway when he felt this cool breeze, and it gave him goose pimples. He calls them goose pimples. I call them goose bumps. It's when your skin, you get cold and you get those bumps on your skin. I stopped at the woodshed and picked up several sticks of wood. I didn't turn on any lights on entering the house. The dark, quiet atmosphere was a perfect setting for the mood I was in. I built a fire in the fireplace and pulled up my favorite rocker. As I sat there in the silence, the fire grew larger. It crackled and popped. Firelight shadows began to shimmer and dance around the room. The warm, comfortable heat felt good. So he brought firewood into his house. He got into his rocking chair and just started making a nice warm fire. I struck a match to light my pipe. As I did, 2 beautiful cups gleamed from the mantel. I held the match up so I could get a better look. There they were, sitting side by side. One was large, with long upright handles that stood out like wings on a morning dove. The highly polished surface gleamed and glistened with a golden sheen. The other was smaller and made of silver. It was neat and trimmed and sparkled like a white star in the heavens. Okay, so as he's over there sitting by the fire, he sees 2 cups. They're just sitting on the mantle, and he's just describing what each one of them looks like. One was small, one was larger, one had large, long, upright handles that looked like wings. The other was smaller and it sparkled like a white star in the heavens. I got up and took them down. There was a story in these cups, a story that went back more than a half century. As I caressed the smooth surfaces, my mind drifted back through the years, back to my boyhood days. How wonderful the memories were. Piece by piece, the story unfolded. Okay, so it seems like when they say the story unfolded, that usually tells me that we're about to hear the story. So it seems like we're ending here. He's thinking about his boyhood days, and probably the next chapter is going to be about the story of him in his boyhood days with his dogs.